Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're at part 9 of our Tamiya TT-02D Drift Spec Toyota Supra build series. We're going to be working on steps 29 through 32. We're going to hook up all of the electronics, test them, and then install them all into the chassis. This is the Tamiya ESC that was included in the kit. It is model TBLE02S. Spend some time and read this manual. There's a lot of helpful information inside. Of course, we had that sport tune motor that we've already installed. We're going to need a steering servo, a receiver with its transmitter, and of course the battery. All right, let's hook them all up and make sure everything is working. Every part we're going to work on today will apply to any TT-02 variant. And all of the basic concept of how all of the electronics work together would apply to pretty much any electric-powered RC car. I won't be able to cover all of the specifics of your electronics, such as the servo and the receiver transmitter. You're going to have to refer to the manual for more information. All right, let's take a look at this diagram right here. So we have the transmitter, we have the battery, which hooks up to the ESC, and the ESC connects to the receiver, and the receiver connects to the servo. All right, let's connect them all together to make sure it works. So let me connect the battery to the ESC, and the only plug that will work for that is this one right here. Next, we're going to connect the ESC to the receiver. And the ESC is always channel 2. And now let's plug the servo into the receiver as well. And the servo is always channel 1. The next step will vary depending on which transmitter and receiver that you have. So you're going to have to refer to manual on how to bind the transmitter and receiver. I have already done so let's check everything works. Going to turn on the transmitter and then turn on car here, and we have a red light. Now if everything's working, the servo should turn. I don't know if you can hear that. Okay. All right, now that we know everything works, let's move on to the next step of putting the servo saver on. All right, let's look at all the parts we need to put together the servo saver. We're going to need P1, D10, P5, and either P4 or D11. And you can see the difference between the P4 and D11 right here. I have P4 right here, and you can actually see that it's stamped the same way the diagram shows right here. And the difference between these two is the spline count on the servo. So if you have a Sanwa or Sanwa based servo, you're going to have a 23 tooth spline. For the SPD low profile servo that I'm using, it is based on the Futaba standard of 25 tooth spline count. So that means I'm going to be using P4. And here's P5. That's D10. And this is P1. And if you're really not sure about your spline count, you can always just test fit either one. Make sure it fits. You don't have to force it down. It should just sit right into the servo if it's the correct one. All servos also work with a different size screw, and Tamiya has included quite a few varieties. Again, depending on your servo, you're just going to have to test each one to see which one fits. Okay, this is the one for my servo, so now I'm ready to put it together. A very important step is to make sure the servo is neutral, meaning it's perfectly aligned in the middle before you put on the servo horn. That means you need to power it up and make sure the steering trim on your transmitter is at 0 or near 0. And let's take a look at my trim. My trim right now is in neutral. Power again. Still working. So we want the servo to go on perpendicularly with its layout like this. And to do so, we need to put on P4. like that. And you're never going to get it perfectly straight. You're going to have to work with the steering trim later, but for now we're just going to put it as close to perpendicular to the servo as possible. Then it's part P5. Just have to make sure that indexes properly. And then it's the servo saver again, and there is a tab right there that you can index into that slot, like that. And now the P1 washer, and then the screw. Now we can turn everything off and unplug the servo again to work on the next step. And when we power it back up, we're going to know the servo saver is installed in the correct position. All right, the screws you're looking for in the next step are going to be in this little baggie right here. This baggie is the one with the silver washers. These two are going to be the MB1s, and these two are going to be the MC4s. Let's work on this step first. You're going to need A5, D6, and 2 of these B11s. Let's start by pushing the B11 balls into part D6. Now we're going to thread this side of the D6 onto the servo saver. Okay, make sure there's range of motion. And then on the other side, we're going to link it onto this A5. Okay. All right. Now let's find the A12 servo mounts. Let's bring over those washers and the 2 A12s. So keeping the servo this direction, the A12s has a curved side that's going to be on top, and this side is going to mount onto the chassis. All right, for step 31, we're going to need the chassis back. We're going to need 3 of these MA3 flathead screws and 2 of these MC2 step screws. You're also going to need some grease. First, we'll work on installing the servo, then we'll worry about the receiver. So for the servo, this is the top side, this is the bottom side. We need to make sure these 2 holes are going to line up with those 2 right there. Now we're going to connect this bridge onto the steering linkage assembly. And to do that, we're going to use the 2 step screws, and we also need to apply some grease right here in the neck. All the parts are the same color, so it might be a little bit hard to see. But that's the way it connects. Again, you don't want to over tighten. Now the other side. Okay. It should look like that. All right, now I'm going to bring back the receiver and part D12. And we're going to thread the antenna into this hole right here. And there is a notch for the wire to go through. And we just need to secure it to there. The receiver is going to be taped on to the servo. So we just have to make sure everything kind of works. Let me just get that screw on there first. All right, that was pretty tough to tighten. Now I got it in there. I really want it like this with the plugs I can put on this side. It says here the next step is to tape on the receiver switch, but our switch is attached to the ESC. So let's go ahead and flip the page first. And on the next page, we're going to tape the receiver onto the servo and then the ESC right next to it. So I'm going to do that first. Let me tape this down right there. And for that, in the part C bag, there is this double-sided tape. And they've helped you with how big these two tape pieces need to be. And when you're taping this, you have to be real careful if you have a larger receiver so that it doesn't interfere with your steering. I'm going to take out the slack. I have plenty of room for the ESC. If I used a standard size servo, I would have to butt this ESC up a lot closer to the motor. So that's one of the advantages. Okay, so I need to connect those, and I also need to tape the switch to here. So let me do that first. Okay, I have a small piece of tape for the switch, and I'm going to align the on to the front of the car and off to the rear. Put this near the bottom because the rail here on the tub doesn't go all the way to the top of the switch. I could have cut the tape even a little bit smaller. All right, next. Let's see how we can tape down the ESC. It's going to be like that. So I need to do something about this wire right here. And that's where these zip ties come in. I'm just going to try to tuck that in there. You also have to make sure the wires don't touch the drive shaft. Let me tape down the ESC. I'm going to use this antenna tube. And just make sure. All right, I brought back the battery and hooked it up. Now it's time to connect the ESC to the motor. We have a red and a black lead, a positive and a negative lead. The red wire needs to connect with the yellow wire on the ESC. And the black one needs to connect with the blue one. And we'll find a place to tuck in the orange wire later. Now let's first test it. Transmitter on, turn on the car. Let's make sure we still have steering. Very good. Now let's see if we have throttle. My throttle forward and reverse were backwards, so I made that change on the transmitter, and now we're ready to go. And now it's just to do some cable management to make it look a lot neater. Okay, this is probably the best I can do for now. I ran the ESC wire from behind, and I came back up over here to connect to the receiver. I zip tied the motor wire and ESC wires together. Then I separately attached that bundle to the battery wire. It seems pretty neat to me. It seems everything's going to be out of the way, so I'm pretty happy about this. So that's it for today's video. We linked up and tested all of the electronics, and we taped down the servo, ESC, and tested everything again. So thanks for watching this video. If you got anything out of it, please drop a like, subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys in the next one.